The scenario essentially is a cinematic fairy tale that's set in a labyrinth. Viewers, as they enter the labyrinth, discover that there are some floating eyes, and these floating eyes become the means by which the viewers can navigate through the labyrinth. These floating eyes can track and interpret what the viewers are doing. They interpret and track viewers' movement through the space. As they move through the space, the viewers, with their eyes, discover a number of characters who are lost, who are trying to make their way through the labyrinth as well. And part of their making their way through the labyrinth is to solve a puzzle that will help them get through the labyrinth. However, unfortunately, in solving that puzzle, in making their way through the labyrinth, the viewers discover that there are some other characters who are doing everything in their power to inhibit the viewer's movement through the labyrinth, and these characters are intelligent characters. They become like the co-creators of the narrative with the viewers. They will be doing everything in their power to inhibit the viewers, but in doing so, the interaction between the viewers and these AI characters, artificial intelligent characters, create the story, which comes out of this transaction between what the viewers are doing and what the characters on screen are doing. So we're talking about a type of cinema that's in 360 degrees in 3D, that's about narrative not being what the viewers experience or decide is the outcome of the work, but rather the work itself, the outcome of the work, is the result of the way the viewers interact with what's happening on screen.
And would you be able to talk a little bit about how that interactivity is achieved as well?
So there are a number of levels to that interactivity. The simplest way of understanding it is technically the characters have a level of artificial intelligence that allows them to interpret and then respond to viewers' movement through the space. There are lots of different ways of tracking movement today, but also tracking gesture. We decided simply to track viewers' movement through the space so that viewers could understand what was going on. So as viewers move through this space, their movements is being tracked through infrared lighting and an artificially intelligent software system by these characters on screen. And as viewers move in one direction or do one thing, then the artificially intelligent screen characters are deciding, okay, this person's moving over there, what should I do in this situation? How should I respond? And the artificially intelligent characters are doing about 10,000, making 10,000 decisions per second about what they can do to respond. So the type of responses are quite complex and quite fertile and very rich. So that's on the simplest level. On a more, on a richer artistic level, the interaction involves the development of the story. So the story has lots of different pathways, if you like, and a number of different outcomes. But that really depends on the way the viewer moves and behaves, and the way the artificially intelligent characters track the viewer and make decisions. And those two things in combination then lead to different voiceovers or different pieces of music, different types of what you could call transactional or exchanges between the viewers, the audience, and the on-screen characters. So that creates the type of musical effects that we have, the type of things that are said, the types of things that you see.
And you mentioned the story, you mentioned the narrative. What actually attracted you to this particular story? I mean, why was this story chosen as the means of navigating people?
So the story wasn't so much chosen, but rather the story evolved out of the testing we did. We started with a simple children's game to allow us to understand how do you allow 5 people. We selected 5 people because we felt it was a good group number. Part of the work is about social storytelling. In other words, people seeing and observing and sometimes helping each other to create a story. We wanted a good size human group, and 5 is the ideal human group to work with in that situation. We decided that 5 people working together would best work to start with a simple game. So storytelling has evolved out of playing children's games. I mean, that's how people learn to put bits of data together, organise things into a story. and through doing that they get a sense of themselves in relationship to other people. So the simple story we started with was just putting building blocks in holes in a virtual space. So that in a way solved the technical problem. People could understand if they did one thing, then the virtual characters would do another thing in response. But that, of course, was too simplistic and rather boring, really, and too much like a game. In other words, it really didn't have an open-ended outcome that we were interested in. So we were more interested in what are sort of artistic type of storytelling or cinematic storytelling can we use with this system. So then we tested a number of other different scenarios, and this one that we ended up with came out of testing with about 800 different people, slowly, gradually changing the voiceover script, changing the music, changing the visual settings, and we eventually decided on this story about being lost in a labyrinth, because we felt it was a very powerful way to get people to understand that they were interacting with another group of characters who were trying to find their way through a problem. And the stories often have this sense of discovery, of trying to make your way through a problem and solving what is the heart of the problem through the process of moving through the story. So in a way, that's what we settled on. But there were a lot of influences through that process. We were looking at a number of Grimm Brother fairy tales to start with, particularly the Seven Kids, the Wolf and the Seven Kids. We were looking at some of Philip K. Dick's science fiction work. We were looking particularly at, and this is where we started with Samuel Beckett's experimental work for German television called Quadrat 1 and 2, a very simple story. It's a mime, as this work is. This work's a mime. There's no actual conversation occurring between the audience and the on-screen characters. But in Samuel Beckett's work, the starting point for our story, you have four characters who are in a square, on the 4 points of a square, and the goal of their life, if you like, is to avoid meeting each other at any point on the square. So they're moving around the square, either on the perimeter of the square or the diagonal across the square. They're moving across but always avoiding each other. So we flipped that around, and our objective was for people to make contact with the on-screen characters, but the exercise was still the same. It was about how movement between people and between people and on-screen characters creates a story. How when you move from point A to point B, you also have to negotiate with characters who are trying to disrupt you or who are moving across your path. And so we started with this very simplistic, but in a way very complex and very fertile notion of Beckett's about how stories are really about how people behave in relationship to each other.
You mentioned the social aspects of this work, and one of the things you mentioned in the paper you gave in Seoul last year was the dialogue across physical and digital spaces, the potential for that. Do you think this is sort of an extension that comes out of our sort of Web 2 socially networked age?
I think where all this is moving is that we're trying to find a way for seamlessly working with, cooperating with characters in a virtual world. I think we're finding that increasingly, but not only characters in the virtual world, but ourselves and our friends and our colleagues in this virtual world. So in a way we're creating another world. We've had different types of worlds in the past. We've probably had two previous worlds. We've had the world where we've had simple implements like a bone that we've used as a way of creating a different world. We've created other things using that bone. We've had other worlds where we've used machines to create things for us to navigate through the world. I think we're now in this third world where we've created a digital world, where the digital world becomes a parallel universe in a sense for us, where we can do the things we do in our normal world, but do it in a much more extensive and a much more social way. I think the digital promises, people have talked about the digital revolution, but I think it's actually a social revolution that the digital provides. It provides a new way for people to cooperate and work together. So at the heart of this is about a group of 5 people working with each other, but also working with a group of 5 virtual characters working together to create the story.
Mm. I mean, one thing that struck me walking through a scenario was how seamless the experience felt. That you are quite immersed in it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Did you feel in the process of putting this work together limited in any way by the current technology, or was it actually did you find it liberating to
well, again, it was a matter of testing. So when we started with the children's game, that was very intriguing, but it wasn't sufficiently immersive because it was in one scenic space, if you like. It was just a flat space and there was no depth to it. So then we developed the idea of the labyrinth to allow you to move through much deeper spaces. We found that black and white in the digital gives you that sense of immersion a lot more than colour, so we went for black and white, also to be respectful back to the original fairy tale genre, which was illustrated in the 19th century and the 18th century in black and white to start with. But yeah, there are limitations to the technology, and we've worked the best we could with the limitations of those technologies as they are at the moment. I think the future promises a lot more immersion. In fact, immersion is the way cinema is now moving. I think cinema's moved from silent film to spoken film, from black and white to colour. I think the big change now is to move into the immersive experience, into 3D. And I think this is all part about making the digital seamless with the human, if you like, so that people feel that the world of the cinematic or the digital is simply an extension of their own world. I think this is what people enjoy, and particularly if they want to cooperate or to interact with each other, they would like that interaction to be as tangible and immediate as possible. So there are limitations with the current technology, but it's changing so fast. We started off with a passive immersive system where we were using old-style Polaroid glasses from the 50s that haven't really changed, and then we installed a new active projection system which uses electronic glasses, which makes the sense of immersion much deeper and more immediate. But I'm sure there'll be fine-tuning and new developments as we go over the next decade.
And I guess by extension the next question would be, I know sort of Sydney viewers would remember a few years ago the T-Visionarium,
yes,
of course, and I recall that having other applications in the mining world, for example.
And the museum world.
And the museum world, of course.
Yeah.
And what other applications do you envisage for the AI developed in Scenario?
Well, I think this is much more experimental than T-Visionarium in the sense that it uses AI, and so it raises all sorts of issues about intelligent cinema and intelligent storytelling. The way I believe this is moving is that we'll see a convergence between this type of AI cinema and what you have in home cinemas and the gaming environment, where in home cinemas, say in 10 years' time, more than likely you'll have an immersive environment which isn't so much just a flat screen, but it'll probably be 3 screens plus the floor. You'll be inside the cinematic experience, but inside that cinematic experience will be artificially intelligent characters who could be fictional characters, or who could be playing a game with you, or they could be cinematic characters who interact with you. So I think where we're seeing this moving is into a converging cinematic or theatrical space where people can interact with cinema, interact with gaming, but also interact with friends. Facebook, for example, could become a 3D virtual environment where, in a sense, you're talking to the person directly in front of you, or with numerous people around you, rather than just looking at them on a flat screen page.
Professor Del Favero, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much.